Two jacks of diamonds.
Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Gifford, and we're here at 4052 East Smith Road in Medina, Ohio, to interview our grandmother, Ruth Gifford. All of the grandchildren will now introduce themselves. Lisa? What's your name?
I'm Lisa Gifford.
And how old are you?
14.
And where are you from?
Spring, Pennsylvania.
I'm David Gifford. I'm 16. I'm from Sing Spring, Pennsylvania.
I'm Mike Farrell. I'm 15. I'm from Republic, Ohio.
Stephanie?
I'm Stephanie Farrell, and I'm 11, and I'm from Republic, Ohio.
I'm Caroline Gifford. I'm 13, and I'm from Columbia, Maryland.
Our set designer and makeup designer for this afternoon's production is Julie Farrell. Julie?
Hi.
Today we have the pleasure to interview our grandmother, Ruth Gifford, who is black. We're interviewing her in order to have a record of everything interesting that's ever happened to her in her life, or at least stuff that she'll tell us about. So what we're going to do is each go around and take turns asking the questions, and I'll start, if that's all right with everybody.
Go ahead.
All right. Grandma, tell us about your childhood and your brothers and sisters and parents.
Well, I was born in Strasburg, Ohio, on 5th Street, Southwest, April 21st, 1927. I was the youngest of 3 siblings. My brothers were Glenn, who was 14 years older at the time, and my brother Dale, who was almost 7 years older than I was. My parents were Bill, or William, Reed, and my mother always went by Katie, but her name is Catherine Elizabeth. I was born actually in I don't know what the number of it was. The house beside 119, 121, I think. And when I was a year old, I moved to 119 5th Street, Southwest. And the old story is I fell off the front porch because we moved there before there were any steps. And I just went over the side. I lived there all my life. Lovely brick house. All my friends lived right on that street or very close on the next street, either way. I can remember roller skating on the sidewalk, riding a scooter, which I wanted desperately, and I think my brother Dale bought that for me with his paper route money one year. Never allowed to own a bicycle because Glenn had fallen off and broken his arm, and it was never replaced correctly, and so my mother did not want me to have a bicycle, so I never had that. We spent a lot of time playing games like kick the can, hide and seek, hours playing Monopoly, and we each had a different, one had Monopoly, one had high finance, one had easy money, and we would start and play for hours, never stop the game, just put it on paper and pencil and continue it later. Seems like my house was always a place for the friends to visit because my mother loved to have us there. Always had cookies, fudge, all those good things. We did a lot of our homework there. We had a big round table, and a lot of kids would come there at night and we'd study together.
What do you think is the biggest difference between your childhood compared to our childhood? Is it the technology differences or what?
Oh, true. I mean, we didn't have television to watch, computers. That was probably the biggest thing.
Do you remember, and I don't know if this is anybody else's question, but do you remember your grandparents?
I remember Grandma and Grandpa Eisinger because they lived about a mile at the other end of Strasburg. I vaguely remember my Grandma Reed. I think I was about 5 or 6 when she died. And I'm not sure whether I really remember her or whether I just think I remember her
Right.
from pictures. My Grandpa Reed died before I was born.
And what did your grandparents live on farms?
When I knew Grandpa and Grandma Eisinger, they lived at the last house at the north end of Strasburg. They had lived on a farm before. My Grandma Reed lived on a farm with my uncle Vincent and his family. And we would stop usually every week and pick up, I think it was butter that we bought there. So we would get to see Grandma Reed when she was living.
Was your grandfather Eisinger retired when you knew him?
At one point, he ran the gas station across the road, and they had a, that was another thing we did a lot of. We played croquet, and he had a hard surface, mud clay court. I mean, it wasn't cement or anything. And we would go, I can remember going over to the service station, and right beside it was this croquet court, and we loved to play there. We played at night. Dale had lights out on the yard so that we could even play at night.
How was the service station different then than it is now? Did you?
I don't remember a whole lot about it, but here again, it was strictly, as far as I remember, just people stopped in and got gas, and somebody waited on them.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
Oh wait, Caroline has a question relating to all of this.
This goes back to the technology thing. Did you have one of those big old radios?
We had a radio. I can remember it. Yes, it was a big one. I always sat in this little room of my parents' home, and I can remember listening. I think it was KDKA, and the program that I remember most was listening to Little Jimmy. Don't ask me what his last name was. And I don't know why my dad liked this too. And he would sing, and I can remember sending in for his songbook and getting all his pictures. And also the other big program was Hit Parade. Every Saturday night we would listen, and they would start with number 10 song, and they would name that and play it, and then number 9 and what was the favorite song for the. And that, we always did that. We never missed, and we wrote them down. My girlfriend and I did this.
Okay, Hannah.
All right. Well, we were wondering about your college experiences, especially we found out that you got a music scholarship.
It wasn't a music scholarship. It was just an academic scholarship. I can still remember sitting or being in my study hall in Strasburg. It was a big study hall, and one day as I was looking at the bulletin board, here was a thing that said they were offering, scholarships to Kent State. And I was standing there reading it, and one of my teachers who had also gone to Kent State come over, and he said, "Why don't you apply for it?" And so I did, and this will sway you. I got it. It meant my tuition was $30, and I got that free. So it would have cost me a whole $120 to go for a quarter. I mean, even without the scholarship, that would have been room, board, and tuition.
Oh.
So my quarter cost me $90 because I had a $30 scholarship. But I blew it at the end of the first year because I got a C in an English literature class because I had too much Shakespeare in it.
Oh no!
And I didn't keep I think I'd have a B average, and that C pulled me down. So anyway. Of course, now you got to realize I worked in a Brother store for 25 cents an hour to start out, and I worked usually after school, summertime. Saturdays we would go in at 8 o'clock and work till 9 at night with an hour for lunch. So we worked 9 hours.
Did you, just to backtrack a little, can you tell us about your high school? How many people were there, and how did classes work?
Well, I graduated with 21, and I think out of those 21, 12 of us had started in the first grade together. And there was no kindergarten. we had one class of each all the way through. The elementary was 1st through 6th grade, and then we jumped over to the other building, which was new, by the way. When I went over there in 7th grade, it was very new. You know, to us that was a big group, and it was 7th through 12th grade. And a lot of the classes were so small. For instance, when I took French, there were kids a year behind me, or a year older, so that there were enough to have class, because there weren't that many that took French or geometry or whatever it was. You often were in classes with kids a year older or a year younger.
So, like, what was the typical class size?
Well, you can't really say. You mean subject-wise?
Subject-wise, subject-wise.
Oh, that varied. Like French probably didn't have more than 10 in, while of course, your history classes would be your entire class of 21.
Okay.
Okay, what kind of activities and like clubs or classes were you involved in at Kansas State?
In school?
Yeah.
Music, band, chorus, girls, sextet, orchestra, and one time I played violin in the orchestra only because my brother had a violin and I picked it up and learned to play it without any lessons. I did take a few lessons in school, and 2 of us got real unhappy one time, and we decided we were going to quit orchestra. And it was so small that if we quit, they had to shut down. So the conductor leader came in and talked us into it, but I remember, we'd had it. Orchestra was not our thing. What else did I do?
This was at Kent or Strasburg?
Oh, this is Strasburg.
Right, okay.
I would say everything was basically music. Went to all the sports events. I mean, you never missed a basketball game. We had 6-man football, I think, the year I was a senior. Girls, of course, could not play in anything. There was no such thing as a girls' sport. Was in play, both the junior and senior play.
What were they?
Can't answer that. Something that you never heard of, I'm sure. Some little. I could tell you if I looked it up, but I don't remember. It wasn't anything important or well known. We always had operettas when I was in grade. Well, no, I don't think I was ever in an operetta. There were some other classes that did operettas.
What did you do differently in college?
Pardon?
Did you do the same in college? Like activities?
No, I didn't. Well, I started out playing in the band, but didn't keep that up. I don't know. Didn't feel I was good enough, I guess. Went to a Methodist religious group for gals, and there was one mixed. Enjoyed that. Can't even think of the names. What the group one was Wesley Foundation. Can't even remember the name of the gals. Here again, went to the sports events, but didn't take part in any, of course. That's where you did.
Okay.
Worked in the library.
Is that how you started? You got interested in the library?
No, actually, here again, I don't know why, who, what. There were certainly no advisors, but I always thought I wanted to be a librarian. And so I was going to go to Kent and get my 4 years and go to library school. I don't know where the money would have come from, but that was what I didn't think about that. You didn't think about those things in those days. But when I was a freshman, of course, you could always get jobs working in the library. So I worked in the catalog department, always, every day. And then, fortunately, they started teaching undergraduate library courses when I was a freshman or sophomore. Never had one there before. And so I graduated with a major in library science in undergraduate work, which is very rare because then, I don't know how many, 3-4 years later, they went to majors, graduate school. And, but I always thought, I'd go someplace else and all. I didn't have any money to go someplace else. And by that time, I didn't need it because they started the
Tell us,
undergraduate library courses.
tell us about the role that the library played in your life when you were younger.
No, you've heard this before. Until I was in 3rd grade, Strasburg didn't have a library. And then they started a library in a room of a house. The lady that lived there was going to be the librarian, actually 2 rooms. And the day that they opened it, I was sitting on the doorstep along with another girl, Jean Middle, and Carl Ailing, and we were the first 3 to get a card from that library. And I happened to be the first one, so I had number 501 library card, and I read everything that was in that. We could walk, because it was only about a half a mile, and so when we didn't have anything else to do, or if we were out of books, we went up and got some new books. And she, of course, the librarian would have, it was a county library, and she would have to get new books from the county library and exchange the old ones. So she was always looking forward for me to get books from the county library.
You know, when you said that, I have this vague recollection. Was that library still there when I was a child and it was in like a side door of a White House?
Yes, it probably was. And then they moved that library into the front of what used to be a grocery store. In the back had a beer parlor. And I always used to say it was the only place you could get a book and a beer in the same building. Now that library is at the top of 5th Street where I lived in what used to be the Catholic Church. And that's now owned by the city of Strasburg town. And I would have loved it because all I had to do was walk up the top of the hill.
To go back a little bit, and I don't mean to monopolize the questioning here, but tell us about your parents, what they did occupationally, and just generally about them.
Well, my mother and dad. My mother went to school. She was allowed to go to school 6 years. And then she had to quit and go out and work, and anything that she made went back to her parents because she was the oldest of 9. Her, of course, Grandpa Eisinger was from Germany, and Grandma Eisinger was German background. So she always said she hated, her first job was sewing, and she just despised that. But from then on, she always worked for people, cleaning, cooking, mostly cleaning, I would say, and cooking. And Dad was allowed to go to school 8 years, and then he had to quit school to go out and work for people. And I suppose, I don't know what his money, he was in the middle of about, 7, 8 children. And they met working for, I can't think of the name of the people, at what used to be called Snyder's Crossing, which is down in Dover Township, near where the old Bueller, where the new Bueller store is now. And that's where they met, and they were married and built a house very close to that farm where they worked, and I don't know how many years they lived there, and then moved to Strasburg. Mom always did cleaning for people, and of course this was Depression years, and she always enjoyed, actually. She would bake cookies in the morning before she'd take them up to whoever she was working for, and Dad worked most of the time that I remember, he worked at the brickyard. And of course, during the Depression, he had no job, and he helped build the dams for the WPA project.
Why don't you tell them what the WPA project was?
Works Project. Oh, what's the A stand for?
Administration.
Administration. And it was for people who could not get jobs anyplace else. Instead of welfare, being put on welfare, you worked for your money.
That was
he worked. I mean, they built dams.
The Bolivar Dam.
No, that's one. That's where he worked.
Yeah. And that was a FDR New
Yes.
Deal program.
Yeah.
And when he worked in the brickyard, what did he do?
Hard physical labor, making bricks.
Do you remember any more details about
Yeah.
that? 'Cause
All I remember is when he was talking to, Gene Meadows' son, who was also working at the brickyard when he was, much, much, much later. And Grandpa was laughing about how different it was from when Gary worked there and everything was automated to where he did everything by hand. And Ken can probably remember one time when he was complaining about not making enough money, and Grandpa went into his little suitcase, which was when he lived here and had all his possessions in one little suitcase, and he brought out this little book and showed him where he had made, about $2 a week, and he said, "Don't you complain about the money you're getting." Because he used to work hard, and that was his salary. Of course, it went a lot further.
Do you know how they made bricks in those days?
No.
'Cause
Your dad could tell you that because he worked in the brickyard for a while.
I think basically
Molded,
Grandpa
probably.
used to talk about wooden molds and just putting, moistening the clay and pouring it into the molds and then putting it in the kiln. Yeah, drying it and then putting them in the kilns. And then after the dams were built and the Depression was over, what did he do occupationally?
I think that's when he worked in the bursary. And see, I can't even tell you, he was also church custodian for 30 years. But that was a part-time job. And of course, Mom helped do that, and I would spend Saturdays up there dusting the red chairs and making sure all the bolts were off the pews.
And how were they different, Grandma and Grandpa, how were they different as parents than maybe we are today?
Well, Mom was always home in the first place. If she went out to work, it was always after I went to school, and most of the time she was back by the time I got home or shortly after. That's all she knew, and she cooked, as you said, chicken and mashed potatoes. Company every Sunday, either we went someplace or somebody came to our place, and we always had a big chicken dinner or whatever. And of course, Dad was always very, very quiet. And he was tired. He would work till late, 5, 6 o'clock. He'd get home and he'd be tired. But they always went to all the school activities, any open house or band parents. My mother was very active in that. And of course, church organizations. Never a leader. Always in the kitchen. Guess that's where I get it from. Never president of any group or anything like that. Also, I can remember when she would have quilts, they put in a quilt on Monday morning, and I'd get to run around and tell everybody the weekend before that Mom was putting in a quilt, and then all the neighbors and for instance, my aunt in Dover would come up and they would quilt from early morning till noon. They always went home. They never brought their lunch. Or they'd come in the afternoon, and we would always serve refreshments before they'd leave home.
Oh, yeah, we're going to take a brief break.
If you were to be introducing your parents to your grandchildren that had never met them before, what would you say about Grandpa and Grandma?
Very quiet, humble people. Hard workers. Honest.
What about what I used to see and what I heard a lot more about in terms of, talk a little bit about people coming to the house for food.
Oh, we always had what in those days were called gypsies. And, they would come to your house and always come to the back door and ask for something to eat. And, of course, a lot of people would just give them something and leave. My dad would always invite them downstairs. Mom would fix a plate. Dad would take it down, stay with him, or her, no, that was a man. And what they did was walk the railroad tracks, and our house was across the creek in the road from the railroad tracks. And they obviously marked your house some way. They always knew that that was a house where they could get something to eat. And they never went away hungry. Mom always, you know, there was always extra at our house as far as food.
Okay. Lisa?
Okay. How did you and Grandpa meet?
I started college in 45, and your grandpa was in the service. Came back to Kent in 46, and of course that was my second year, and my friend, colleges always seem to see people alphabetically. So, Madge Goddard sat beside of Bill Harrington, and they got to know each other, and Bill asked Madge to a dance, and said he had a friend. Did she have a friend? So I went to this dance with Madge, and that's where we met.
It was a blind date!
Probably the one and only dance we ever went to in our life. Not many more after that. Anyway, that's how we
Well, that leads into an interesting question. You said that was one of the only dances. Did you guys, in college, did you do things for fun with, like, did you date? Did you go on dates?
Yeah, from then on, that was, like I said, fall 46. I mean, you went to football games and basketball games. And I can remember going over to Akron to a Sammy Kaye show or something like that. And so that was in 46, and then we were engaged on Christmas Eve of 47, and married in September of 48.
We can just go back for a minute. Can you tell us about how the war affected your life? Like, how did World War II affect?
Not a whole lot, because it started when, well, it was my whole high school.
Right.
Was during war years.
Tell us about Pearl Harbor Day.
Well, I started in the fall of 41 and graduated in the spring of 45. Right?
Mm-hmm.
War years. Some of the there was one fellow in my class who dropped out of school and went to the war. A couple of fellows enlisted afterwards. Of course, my brothers were gone. Glenn wasn't in very long, but Dale was in longer. I was working in the store, and of course we had to deal with ration stamps. People could not come in. You only got a certain amount of sugar or pineapple or bananas. You had little stamps, and when you wanted, you got a booklet. For instance, there was your sugar stamps, a booklet of those. There were shoes. You were only allowed to get so many pairs of shoes a year. Gasoline, you could only have so much gasoline. And whenever you would, and meat, there were little red and blue tokens. I don't remember what the difference was. And you had to give up a token when you bought something. So you couldn't always have everything you wanted during those years. I suppose probably cut down a little driving, although we probably wouldn't have gone that much further anyway. And I can remember the stars. There was, whenever you had someone in your family in the service, you got a blue star flag that you hung in your window. And of course, at one point, we had one with 2 stars in it for both my brothers. And if the serviceman should be killed, then you were given a gold star. And the boy 2 houses down from us was killed in the service, so his mother was Gold Star Mother. My mother always belonged to the Blue Star Mothers organization, and they did things for fellows in the service. I think it cut out some things at school probably because you couldn't have the gasoline to go to tournaments or things like that.
Tell us a little about your wedding.
About my wedding?
Yeah.
Well,
I have a jump there.
I was down at St. John's United Church of Christ. At that time it was St. John's ENR. in Strasburg on a Saturday, September 11th, 1948. Jean Midoff was my bridesmaid. She had lived across the street from me all my life. My other bridesmaid was my friend from college, Midge Goddard. The best man was, I'll stop and think about this one, your Uncle Richard, who died when he was 31. Lawrence was supposed to be one of the ushers, but had hurt himself, his arm or finger or something, and did, so at the last minute we pulled in Clarence Cole, I think. My brothers helped usher. The reception was held right there in the church, strictly punch and cake. Got your this one up.
What was your dress like?
Pardon?
What was your friend?
What was my dress like?
Yeah.
It was the same dress that your Aunt Kathy was married in. So if you look at her picture, well, I've got pictures in there too. Long, very long train when I had it, and that was cut off because it got stepped on or torn or something. The best thing about the wedding though is when your grandfather parked his little, 36 Ford in the backyard, of course, when we went to the wedding, locked it up, and when we came home, the keys were in the inside. For some reason, we couldn't get into the car. I think he locked himself. We had to break a window to get in and get the keys. We spent our honeymoon in Hotel Nesta in Canton, the first night. And we found the bill for this not too long ago. I think it was $12 or $15 a night. I'm not sure which. It was very little. We laughed about it. And then we went to Niagara Falls, as everybody else did, for our honeymoon. And here again, we had this little, who must have got the window replaced, I don't know. But anyway, we went in this little old 36 Ford, and the guy stopped us with the tours, wanted to know if we didn't want to take a tour, and your grandpa said no. We had a car, and I remember the guy said, "You call that a car?" So we always laughed about that, but we had a good time. Yeah.
When did you move to Medina?
We were married in 48. I still had 6 hours of college, and your grandpa still had some time. So we stayed there for a year, and I got a job as children's librarian at Kent Public Library, and was able to finish my 6 hours. And then when your grandpa got all his college credits, he started in on his master's. So we really graduated then in the spring of 48. Stayed there that summer and moved to Medina in 49, that would have been, yeah. Lived in an apartment, shared, there was an older lady lived upstairs, and we had the rooms downstairs, shared a bathroom, paid, I think it was $30 a month for that apartment. That included all utilities, a little free babysitting when your dad arrived, and then moved from there to Oak Street when Don was about 6 months old. Lived in that house on Oak Street until Ken was born in March of 56, and moved out here in the fall of 56.
What were your jobs?
What were my jobs? Well, as I said, I had 1 year as children's librarian in Kent Public Library. Had worked, of course, in the University Library. all through college. Came here and applied for a job, and they said, would you consider being children's librarian, because the bookmobile librarian is going to quit in a year, and if you would stay on as children's librarian, then you could have the job of bookmobile librarian, which I did till your dad was born. See, now you here again, you kids wouldn't know anything about this, you know. I walked into the public library and said, I'm looking for a job, and she talked to me for a couple of minutes, sent me out to the president of the library board, and at the end of the day had a job. You know, they were looking for me, and I was looking for them. Then after, I guess all three of you, I don't know, no, it must have been when after Don was born, they had extension classes here at Medina from Kent State. And just for something to do, I thought, oh, I'm going to take some education courses. I think the first one was on child development, because I remember making a report using his pictures. And but then that just continued, and oh gosh, I guess then, I subbed a little bit in the library, but then I stayed home till Ken was in second grade, and I thought, by that time I'd gotten a lot more education courses. Some of them had to go to Wadsworth, and so I was going to substitute. I thought that'd be fun. So I went into the county office, and I knew the county superintendent because your dad had worked for him, and said, I'd like to think about substituting. He said, you don't want to substitute. And he pointed to a big map, and all these pins were stuck on this county map, and he said, these are all jobs available in the county. Which one would you like? And of course, I didn't have an education degree at that point. I had enough hours to get certified. And he said, now this one you might like. It's the closest one. It's a second grade out at York. He said, but there's only one problem. The other second grade teacher is very difficult to get along with. He said, I think you could get along with her.
Who was that, Lenny?
No, Mrs. Banky.
Oh, okay.
And I never had any problems with her. I could see why other people did. But anyway, that was, and I taught in that same room for 26 years. I think about 6 years of second grade, and then I had the choice. They said, well, you can either teach third grade here, or you can go to Valley City and teach the second grade. And I said, no, I'll stay here and switch to a third. So I did that.
What were Grandpa's jobs during this time?
When he came to Medina, he started teaching at Brunswick. He taught from 8th grade to high school, because seniors, physics, he had a physics class. Because at that time, Brunswick School was all in one building, and they probably graduated, I don't know how many kids. And I remember at one point he tells about how he used to have 2 kids sitting in one seat when they started growing. And he was there one year when he heard about the biology job opening up in Medina. So he came to Medina. Don't ask me how many years he taught there, because I don't know. And from there he went out to Black River, and out there he taught a variety of subjects, and he really liked it out there. He should have stayed there.
Well, the first year he didn't teach at Black River. The building was being built. He taught at Spencer.
Spencer, that's true, which became the Black River District. And that was, of all the teaching jobs, he liked it out there, and the kids really liked him. Those were rural kids who really appreciated what he did. But, you know, the grass always looks greener. He heard about a job in Berea and teaching chemistry, and of course pay was a heck of a lot more. So he applied up there, and that didn't work. So from there he went to Union Carbide.
Let's slow down a minute. Do you remember when things were not working out in Berea, we came very close, you all became very close to becoming Christian missionaries in Turkey.
Oh, we thought that wasn't up there, I don't think. I mean, I think that was when he was probably in Medina.
No.
We heard about, I don't think that had anything to do with any teaching. I could be wrong.
It was when I was in the 6th and 7th grade, and Dad went to Union Carbide when I was in the 8th grade.
So wait. You're gonna be Turkish missionaries? Missionaries in Turkey?
We heard about this, church job where you could go to Turkey, and but I guess the big reason was we didn't really want to take Don to Turkey because of the medical problem. But we had a Turkish missionary couple come here and stay here, a weekend or overnight or something. And that was kind of interesting, but then we thought it'd be an adventure, but didn't think about it too long.
What was your first house like?
Oh, I told you
Remember
about
that we did that.
Well, I can go back. In Kent, the first apartment that we lived at was upstairs, and we heard about this because it was a relative of where your dad had stayed in college. And we didn't stay there very long because there were too many creepy callers rolling around. We got out of there pretty fast. And then we had an apartment in Kent that was very nice, had just been built, and it was owned by one of the fellows on the library board. And it was very nice. You could walk both directions. But actually the first house that we ever owned was one on Oak Street that Julie said looked like a dollhouse. Had no basement. It was a Gunnison.
Now, what's that mean, a Gunnison?
Well, there's a company that made prefab houses, and they were called Gunnison. And Medina has all kinds of Gunnison. Like you have what's the one now? Ryan Homes. Well, these were Gunnisons, but they were, I think we paid about $10,500 for that and sold it for about $11,500 maybe. And it had 2 bedrooms, one of which was very small. That's why we had to move. There was no room for Ken. And no basement. And it's still there, and it still looks nice. We had one of the nicer lots. It was one of the bigger lots, had a 2-car garage. Big trees in the front and the back that you could spend a lot of time under. That was it.
We're gonna take a short break.
Okay, if we can go, I want to go back to your family of origin, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your 2 brothers and how old they were in comparison to you, and what you remember about them, and what they did when they left home and started working, and how they played with you and the like.
Well, I think I told you my older brother was, I told you the one was about 14 years older. So by the time, he was practically out of school. And I met Marge. Marge always talks about that she came into my life when I was 5 years old. So I knew her all my life. Glenn worked in, at that point probably, can't think of it. He always did bookkeeping. Both Glenn and Dale went to a business school and then worked as bookkeepers. I just went a lot of places with Glenn and Marge. If they went to basketball games, they took me. When we went on vacations, any place, they would take Mom and Dad, because Dad would not drive any place, very far. He loved to travel, but, and I just was always tagging along with them. And that was they were almost parents to me. Dale, of course, was not quite that, much difference in our age, and we really didn't assume, we played croquet, but we still did it separately. He wasn't going to associate with me when I was 6 years younger than he was.
How unusual was it to have a family in that period of time where the girl went to college and the boys didn't?
Probably. I can remember when I wanted to go, Glenn saying, well, if she wants to go, let her go. Because, they had both been to business school. I probably was the first cousin, maybe on either side, and one of the few who ever did go to college. Not very many of my cousins, there were some Isingers who were younger than I did, but most of those, they all went to business school or worked in offices or did something like that.
Tell us a little bit about your jobs at Garver's Brothers and with Republic Steel.
Well, I think I started working at Garver Brothers as everybody else did in that town when I was about 14.
And what was Garver's Brothers?
Garver Brothers was the world's largest country store, was always the way it was advertised, and it was unbelievable. There was this huge 3-story building, and it had everything in it. When you walked in the front door, there was a candy department, there was a drugstore department, there was women's wear, there was a hardware store, and then in the back was a grocery department. It had a shoe repair place. Out the back was a horseshoe man who did horseshoes. On the in the balcony between the first and the second floor was the Amish department, where they would send letters or flyers out to the Amish people, and they would send in from orders all over the country, always cash. One of my jobs was answering those letters, sending back any money that they didn't need for what they bought. Thursday was Amish Day. They would either be brought in by somebody who drove, or they would drive their buggies. They would park them out in the back. The second floor had furniture, appliances, record stores, a cafeteria where the employees could buy sandwiches and soup. And the third floor, I don't know what, I guess that's where the furniture was. And there were toys. And every year they had a big anniversary party. And there were all kinds of contests. One was who could climb a greased flagpole. One was
Did you win?
One was a talent contest. People came from all over to enter the talent contest. I mean, that place was wall-to-wall people. They gave cakes away every hour. They'd give a cake. And I started out working, my first Saturday was in the drug department. Fortunately, there was only one day of that. I hated that. And mainly I was in the grocery department. First we started out, you did everything by hand, paper, pencil. During the war, here's something you were talking about, like cake mix or sugars would come in big bags, and one of my jobs was putting them into little bags and selling them, a pound of sugar or something, like a pound of cake mix. Then I graduated to working Saturdays at the cashiers. I was an assistant cashier when she'd go. Well, if we were real busy, which we were on Saturdays, it took both of us. We only had one cash register, but I bagged, and when she took lunch breaks and that sort of stuff, I did that. And then when I was in college, I came back and did inventory. I also went over to Sugar Creek, where they had a store, and did that part of the time during the summer. And then when I graduated from high school, I knew I wanted to go to college, but I wanted to make some more money. I went to the employment office and was sent to Republic Steel, and there I worked in the billing office.
What year was this, roughly?
45, summer of
Okay.
45. Of course, I didn't tell them I was going to college, and the funny part, there were 2 other girls there, had just graduated, and they were doing the same thing, so we all quit, 3 weeks before college. We told them we were all leaving, which sort of left them in the lurch. But we typed, and also I had to walk out in the mills, picking up certain things, which I didn't like doing that. And
tell the girls about what a steel mill was like in 1945.
Was dirty. And again, a lot of things. I mean, as I'd walk along the elevated walk, you'd look down and see them pouring the hot steel. And I rode what was called a victory bus. They would pick me up at the end of my street, drop me off at Republic Steel. Again, you had to be there, ride back home again. And I worked shifts, which I didn't like. Hated 3 to 11. Sorry about that, Bob. But it was good pay.
Okay. Who's got the next question?
Carolyn.
8.
We're going to jump a lot.
I was going to say.
decide to name Don, Kathy, and Ken?
Well, I wanted to name Don David, but Grandpa didn't want to because he had a cousin David who was in the service and had been killed, and it was one of his favorite cousins. So he didn't think it was right to have another David Gifford.
We only ended up with 2 more.
So he agreed on Donald, I don't know. I wanted to name Kathy Katie.
After your mother.
After my mother, but he didn't like that name. Nowadays, of course, it's very popular. But he had a student named Kathy that he liked real well, and I'm sure that had something influence. I did get the Elizabeth, so she's Kathy Elizabeth. I wanted to name Ken Kent, but your dad didn't like that idea. So we settled for Ken. Also, his middle name, of course, Don's middle name is after Grandpa, and Ken's middle name is after Uncle Richard, who died when he was 31. But, of course, he was still living at that time, but it was...
Was Uncle Richard sick already when Ken was born?
No, he was still living.
Okay.
Did we say do this?
Just skip over it.
Okay, and kind of crossed out. Okay,
This
this is my own personal question because my dad said that at one point you had 9 cats. So did you actually have a lot of cats?
No.
My dad.
We might have had 9 for a short time, but we sure got rid of them. The only reason we ever had cats was because Aunt Kathy liked cats.
What's your funniest memory of the camping trips you guys took?
I think I heard this one being discussed. I don't really know. I guess the time the bear came after your dad and we sent them out for wood, and they came back real fast because a bear had scared them away. And it also came up that night, and didn't it eat something? I think it ate something out of the...
We went to the garbage can right across.
Yeah, okay. Also, the time that Ken would stand there and watch people catching fish like crazy. And he was always going to catch fish, and George would always be there to help him. And he had a big one. It got away. Of course, Ken always learned it on his end.
What is your favorite or funniest memory of teaching?
Funniest or favorite? I can tell you my favorite. And this happened the last year's teaching. And on the dresser, and there's a little frog, a little green frog. And that day, the real mothers had a party. And they had bought a tree that's out in front, and I don't know what all different gifts. The kids, they had collected money or something. I don't know where they got their money from. But the kids were still bringing up little personal gifts. And in that class was a little girl that I knew did not have any money. And actually there was quite a history in her life. I think she had been accused of, I don't know what, even killing a little child. You know, not. But she had moved from Spencer to my school. And she came up with this little gift wrapped in newspaper. And when I opened it up, here was a little green frog sitting there. And I know that's all she had, but she had that stuck in her desk. And since everybody else was giving me something, why, she wanted to share that little gift. So that means as much to me as any other gift I've ever gotten.
Yeah, go ahead.
So about our parents.
They can probably tell you more about that than I can. You should be interviewing them.
Well, tell us about our parents' childhood.
Well, let's see.
We were well behaved.
How about when Dad threw Uncle Ken in the sewer?
I don't remember that. I must not been with, I mean, you know.
Maybe the cameraman.
I can tell how one of them threw the footstool.
Excellent.
And the other one ducked and broke the glass over
Yeah,
there.
Ken threw it.
What we heard.
No, I think it was Kathy said, you know, there was always a baseball game going on around here. You know, the neighbor kids were always fighting and yelling at each other. But, and Kathy had no girls to play with because the whole neighborhood was loaded with boys. I'm sorry. But, you know, I don't know. I guess we did a lot of fun things around home. Didn't have any TV to watch. I made them take piano lessons.
Now wait a minute, we didn't have
Right,
any
Julie?
Wait a minute, we didn't have any TV to watch.
Oh, that's true. You did. You did.
Black and white.
Yeah. I forgot that you did. Didn't have a TV.
No color ever.
Spent hours playing What's This Back Room was their sandbox. That whole thing was sand.
Wow.
And they had roads and all kinds of trucks, and they spent hours out there playing in that.
That's great.
Pardon?
That's great. Let's knock it down and do that again.
What do you remember most about Don/Kathy Ken's teenage years?
Well, I remember
Tell us
one.
what that's something.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, I had to have to think about that one a long time.
Move on.
Move on. Okay. Tell us about your New Year's get-together.
Oh, well, that started way back when they had a group called the Wedding Band. Now, this started before we moved to town. And I'm not sure how we actually got started in it. Probably, just through knowing people at church, we started going to wedding band. And so every New Year's Eve, we would get together at somebody's house, kids and all. Got pretty wild. They used to play hide and seek in the closets and make a lot of noise outside with drum rolls and cymbals when it was at our house, and firecrackers, right, up at Wilder's? I don't know. Anyway, it was lots of fun, and we've kept it up. Now it's down to, well, one couple's completely gone, of course Grandpa's gone. We've added a few extras. Right now, I guess it's sort of going to, 2 years ago we ate out at Michael's, and I guess we're going to do the same thing again this year. And we go home a little earlier than we used to.
Should we go back to the teenagers question, or should we just skip that?
You mean with the
Yeah, what do you remember most about
Well,
it?
Ken's was sports. I remember the football, going to his football games, and always having to arrange supper hour differently for him so he could get to football games on Friday night. And the other two were in bands. 4-H projects, yeah, that was raising bees, which was a sticky mess.
Who wants to?
Why don't you let Becca read it since she wrote it?
Yeah.
No one can.
Sorry.
No one can really interpret that.
Oh, okay. So tell us about what you remember when, each of us were born. Rebecca, Dave, Mike, Lisa, Julie, Caroline, Deb.
Oh, okay. I can remember when, well, first of all, Don was born on a Saturday. It was a very stormy day. When I woke up, there was thundering and lightning. His life's been stormy ever since. They were all born when the hospital was a house. When he was born, it was so full that when I woke up, I was out in the room, or out in the hallway I probably just the rest of that evening, but there was no room available.
No room at the inn?
Pardon?
No room at the
Oh,
inn?
no, wait a minute. Let's not start drawing.
Was there a manger available?
Not in July. Now, there might have been for Kathy.
Was there a bright star?
And I remember being told that as he crossed the street up by the church for some reason.
This is Dad.
Your dad.
Yeah.
That somebody came along that he knew, and he stopped right in the middle of the street to tell him that he had a son. I guess traffic had to stop. Anyway, that was Grandpa's version of it. Kathy, I remember being in the hospital about Christmas time, and I can remember people caroling in the halls. Never forget that. It was, I was lying there. Okay, the carolers down the hall. Also, that first Christmas, George took Dawn to Grandma's, and Kathy and I had to stay home. Nowadays, you would have taken her, but those days you didn't take a 10-year-old baby up, or 10-day-old baby up. Ken, what I remember about you, that's what happens when you're the third one. All I remember is we had to move out of the house because there wasn't room anymore. And I remember he was such a cute little baby.
What about Mama?
That's it.
They want to know about.
What you remember when they were born, when the grandkids were born?
Oh, when the grandchildren were born?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant when they were born. Well, I can remember, here again, Rebecca, I can remember the first time I saw you. We came to Toledo, and you were upstairs sleeping, and your dad ran up to get you, and you came down in this little yellow outfit. Right, Nancy?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I remember holding her for the first time.
Got a picture of
David. Just so happens you were further away.
And you didn't see him until he was over on my
No, I was trying to think. I remember the house you lived in, and I remember holding you you had a rocking chair. And I remember that. Oh Lord, we're getting down here. Mike. I remember Bob calling up. And I remember going into the hospital to see him the first time. Pardon? Kathy called? Okay. Yeah, you didn't call till he was born either, did you? Of course, you didn't have a lot of time.
No, with him I had a couple hours. There was these ones that came like that.
Here again. Now we gotta go down to Lisa. Boy, I don't remember anything in that time. Help me out, Mark.
You came when she was about 2 weeks old.
Oh, yes, I do. I remember you putting her in the walker and taking her to, what was
country, yeah.
the where?
To the Amish country.
Yeah, and I thought, oh, no, I'd never take a child that age. Yeah, you were just a little thing, and there we were. It was, I remember that. Okay. Who are we down to next? Caroline?
Julie.
Julie. Oh, gosh, here again.
Where's Julie?
Oh, I remember. Did they come to stay with Mike? Take them to, we went in to see her in the hospital. I remember them. Who did we go to from Caroline? You were down in Florida. Oh, I know what I remember about you.
What?
I remember your sister calling up and telling, I have something to tell you, Grandma. My mother just went to the doctor's and she's pregnant. Remember that? No, I don't know that. How old were you?
3.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was probably pregnant.
And Stephanie.
Well, that was not nearly as weird as a little bit later in the pregnancy when Rebecca simulated labor.
No, I never heard about that. This was what I remember about her was scary. Not about her, but I came up and I was with Mike and Julie, and I was taking them into the hospital. Bob will remember this a bit, to see her, and we were going out the steps at your kitchen, and I had Mike in one hand, helping him, and Julie. Remember, I fell? And the good Lord saved you. I'm not kidding. Because I ended up with a bump on my forehead. My glasses weren't broke, but they were knocked out of whack. And I'll never know. I went down on that cement floor. I don't know what happened to you, but you were safe. You didn't cry. But we went in and went to the hospital, and I told Bob about it, and he wanted me to go in the emergency room, which I said, no, I don't need to do that. But I had a nice little goose egg. And
She
you
almost
never
spoiled your party, too.
Oh, yes. Because the people out at school had planned a surprise 60th birthday party. And of course they knew that when Stephanie arrived, I was going to take off school and go take care of her. And they were scared to death that she would arrive before the party, and then they wouldn't have me there for the. But she was a good girl. She waited 2 days.
But, so tell us about sort of your involvement with your church throughout sort of your life.
Oh, that's even when I was in Strasbourg. I mean, the church and school was my life in Strasbourg. I mean, you know, that's the difference in people nowadays. That was the only activities you had, was what went on at school and what went on at church. And I mean, of course, I always went to Sunday school. We had a youth group that was very active. You know how those things run. You have years where the kids are very active, and then you have years when they're not. Well, in fact, one of mine went on, a year older than I, went on to become a minister, and we were very active. When we came to Medina, we started going to Sunday school. In those days, we didn't have an adult Sunday school class. In fact, we got there an hour early because of the time change. We ended up in the Sunday school class instead of church. We didn't think we were going to Sunday school. And, you know, we taught Sunday school when the kids were little. Took care of them in the nursery. Been in the bell choir since it started. And they asked me when that was, which people do, and I never remember. Think about 1968. No?
No, because it was after I graduated.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Want to check on that? I don't know. Have always helped. Whatever. Women's fellowship.
Sunday night potluck suppers.
Now it's Wednesday night potluck suppers.
Do any of the adults in the room have questions? Mommy? Yeah, Kathy?
I think we covered it all.
I have two last questions.
Okay, good.
I'm sorry.
Uh-oh, am I ready for this?
Do you have any questions?
I did it well. I can't think what it was, but.
And Kathy? No, Lauren? Okay. Well, if you had one piece of advice to give us, your grandchildren, what would it be? Based on your...
Just one?
Well, we have the rest of the tape, so...
Oh, I don't know. I think you've all done what I would suggest, and that would be get a good education, do a good job in school, do some job that you like. I can't think of anything worse going to a job that I didn't like. Find something you enjoy doing in life and do it.
And do you have any predictions for the future about when we're sitting with our grandchildren in 60 years and doing this? Although it might be some sort of like computerized, digital thing. The talk will be the same about what we'll be telling them.
I'm the wrong person to project what would be happening then.
And Daddy, do you have any questions?
No.
Alright, well, thank you very much. I don't think we mentioned the date at the beginning of the tape, so today is November 27th, 1998, am I right?
Yes.
Today's November 27th, 1998, which is a Friday, and yesterday was Thanksgiving. And we're all here together, and we're signing off with Ruth Gifford.
No, Ruth Reed.
Ruth Reed.
What did you know? Oh, I see.
I don't know. Ruth Reed Gifford.
I could say one thing at the end, and that's, I love you all. Real proud of you.
We love you.
too.
Love you very much. What time did you people have to leave?
Oh, about an hour ago. This production has been brought to you by Ruth Gifford, Caroline Gifford, Stephanie Farrell, Michael Farrell, Rebecca Gifford, Lisa Gifford,
David.
Julie Farrell, David Gifford. You're a latecomer, you don't get full credit. Lori Gifford, Nancy Gifford, and Kathy Gifford, and of course, Kathy Farrell, excuse me. Yours truly, the photographer. Thank you very much for being with us.